Hi, I'm Pamela Wallin, and welcome to another edition of No Nonsense. We're in Humboldt, Saskatchewan, home of the Broncos, so always give them a moment and look at a hockey stick to remember that. But we're here because there is a unique facility. It's called the Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute. That's a mouthful. PAMI for short, which is kind of familiar to me. And there is a woman who has taken this on. She is the CEO, Leah Olson, and this is a place where ideas come to grow and turn into something that can be used not only in this country but globally. She calls herself an operational change enabler. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Leah, thank you and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, well, welcome to Humboldt. We're really pleased to have you here.
You said that a lot of your interest in this part of it, of machinery development, actually comes from your own personal story, your father. Just tell us that story.
Yeah, so I grew up on a grain farm 12 miles north of Tompkins, and most people have no idea where that is.
Southwest.
It's southwest corner, absolutely,
right.
Yeah. And so my dad invented what is called a drop pin, and it is a hitching system that is used across the globe, and it is a standardized
Literally
hitch.
The pin that you put between the two.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was invented. He won an innovation award at the Canada Farm Progress Show in 1987 or 88, and then since went on to become a supplier to all of the major tractor manufacturers. So, my dad was born and raised sort of consistently asking, why? Can we do it better? And so for myself, growing up on a farm, I have roots that are from a very rural area. And, that's really guided me as I've been throughout my career, whether it's in Montreal, Calgary, Toronto. Right. And I feel really fortunate to have the role that I do now with PAMI here in Humboldt.
But I think you probably were open to it. Those of us who grew up on or near farms or visited, farmers had to invent stuff. It was 10 o'clock at night. The machinery had broken down. They were still combining, or seeding, whatever the case may be. And there are a million of those stories. Yeah. It's just that they have to be discovered.
Well, absolutely. And I think that, part of the beauty of Saskatchewan and Manitoba entrepreneurs in agriculture is that, our distance is both a curse and a blessing. So, the scariest moment I've had is being on a combine at 3 miles per hour and trying to ensure that, we're combining. I was combining canola. And, when you're in that vastness, it's pretty clear that if something goes wrong, you got to take care of it. So I'm excited by the continued ingenuity of farmers because they continue to bring out products. There's, kind of the farmer fix. I've heard that used in sort of a negative connotation, whereas I really like it. I think if the farmer fix is good enough, then let's move forward with that. And so here at PAMI, what we do is we work with entrepreneurs in agriculture equipment, but also in mining and transportation. And what we try to do is give them our engineering services and skills and expertise to help them either improve their products or to bring their product to market faster than they would otherwise.
The farmer fix, I'm just thinking baling twine, right? I mean, that's what you did.
Yeah.
You held it together, and then somebody invented, tape. So that was a little further on. But so would you, when you work with people, it might be an individual like your dad that walks through the door and says, I got an idea, but I don't know anything about engineering. This works.
Yes.
Can you help me make it a sophisticated product or a real product?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we work with entrepreneurs who have a brilliant idea, and some of them will have a bit of an anti-engineer take, and our engineers are, they really rise to the occasion, but they also understand that, when you're working with an entrepreneur, he or she has given it a significant amount of time, and typically, education isn't doesn't dictate intelligence. And I think that, when we're working with our clients, that we try to drop the ego and make sure that we're listening to them. And so in the case of an entrepreneur, when they come to us, we want to help them solve problems.
Right.
We also work with the major equipment manufacturers too. So all
big
of them,
companies, all the big ones.
Yeah, all of the big ones.
And are they
Deere,
coming and
Case.
saying we need a fix for this, or we've got a fix and can you help us?
It really depends. Sometimes they'll come to us with a product that they're looking to do a comparison to other similar products, their competitors. And in other cases, they've got a specific problem. We have some really unique test equipment, and so that separates us from some of their internal R&D capabilities. They might not be able to have a shaker table. We've got a shaker table that can really help us identify where the breaking points are on different pieces of equipment. The mining industry, we've done a lot of work with mining and also with the bus industry. And so I'd say that, our team has a really unique expertise in heavy duty off-road and on-road equipment. And so if it runs, many people will bring it to us and we try to break it. So it's kind of an adult playground for,
yes,
for
no
people.
kidding. But you need the guys with 3 degrees on the wall, but you need them, as you say, to put the ego aside and say, wow, that's a good idea. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our team is made up of men and women that are really experts in their field and have a passion for, primarily agriculture, because it is the Prairie Agriculture Machinery Institute. But, we've got a new strategic plan that has us very focused on mining and transportation. And so when we think about autonomous vehicles, for example, mining's been doing that for quite some time, as has transportation. The auto industry is fairly, with Tesla and, others, they're fairly progressive.
Yeah.
But recently when I look at agriculture equipment, the challenges we have are related to how do you get the grain or the seed in the ground and avoid a tank of gas or a tree or a power line. And so trying to use the various transportation industries to really glean from that what we can in agriculture and see if there's some really good cross-functionality in terms of the skills when it comes to something like autonomous equipment.
I think people who are not part of an agricultural community don't have any idea what goes on now with equipment. I mean, we all grew up at a time when, the tractor and you hauled a piece of equipment. Now you've got $1 million combines, tractors, air conditioning, autonomous action. They can determine what the moisture level of the soil is and therefore how much seed to be putting in with the farmer sitting there checking his email. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where the underestimation of non-agriculture people of how much technology is on the farm becomes really clear. And I, in my former role when I was CEO at Dot Technology Corp.
Right, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, I had a couple of really good people, very smart people that would approach me and say, if the agriculture industry only understood sort of these capabilities, and I would often ask them, have you been on a combine? And if their answer was no, I'd say, why don't you come out with us? And so, I've been really fortunate to be able to help non-agriculture people see the technology that is on the farms. And, for older farmers, when he or she come out to the farm and they look at and sit in the cab, it's a very different environment. And so for the younger people who have grown up with either iPads or, gaming, they're very good at manipulating the different controls. And that's intimidating, I think, for some of the older farmers. But I've also worked with farmers that, regardless of age, that they are exceptionally in tune with the sort of technology that is required to maximize their yields. And so, when it comes to variable rate recipes or, being able to know what who seeded what or what the combines are doing, when to call the grain cart, there's a lot of information that is available. And so for anybody that's getting into ag tech, if you're a technology guru first and foremost, but you don't understand agriculture, then I've seen a lot of people in agriculture sort of welcome them. But as soon as a tech person says, well, I know better than you do, it creates a bit of a tension because they really have no idea how much technology.
The circumstances are so unique for farming, but someone said recently, if your kids say to you they want to get into high tech and they want to, they want to go and work at Google or they want to go and work at Amazon or what, tell them to get into agriculture. Yeah. It's the highest tech thing going.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I know, on our end, that, I was really fortunate to work with an entrepreneur like Norbert Bojo, who's the founder of Dot Technology Corp and Seedmaster. And, Norbert's vision for the future of agriculture is quite unique. And, he can see that autonomous farming is coming. And I think that many others in the industry, we know that it's coming. It's not a matter of if, but when. And so when I think about the future of PAMI, where I'm at right now, I want to work with clients who we can provide them a pathway to autonomy. With our capabilities right now, we're probably about 2 to 3 years away from having that. But what that allows us to do is keep our eye on what is happening in the industry, what sort of expertise do we have, where do we have a gap, and then to work with the industry to ensure that our team at PAMI are leaders in whether it's electronics or it's systems integration, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And again, that sort of speaks to the needs of both transportation, ag equipment, agricultural equipment, and in mining.
It's changing the nature when, as I was growing up in an agricultural community, farms were a quarter section, maybe a half section.
Yeah.
Now you've got farmers that are 10 sections or 20 sections.
Yeah.
So the big change has occurred in terms of size. I'm just wondering if you're feeling any resistance of farmers saying, look, the way we used to do it, I knew where to put the seed. I don't want this autonomous seeding thing. This is my connection with the ground. Like, that's a tug and pull.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that there's always, a farmer, if she likes spraying because she can see the weeds that are coming up. Right. I mean, we have camera technology, we have radar or
Correct,
LiDAR and a variety of other sorts of sensors that can identify what the weed is, where it is, etc. And so there's definitely a transition required, I think, when you're looking at automation and autonomous vehicles. And that, I think, is kind of like when COVID-19 hit, many organizations weren't yet able to do video conference calls. And, Zoom
Correct.
Calls. Yeah, so Zoom calls
Senate,
seemed
right?
like, absolutely. Well, even like MPs and the Senate sitting during this time, it has really demonstrated that, there are some secure means of communicating. I tend to like a virtual video conference or a video conference because I can see the individual.
Right.
And if I'm not there sitting across from them, I'm okay with that, but I definitely like the video. And, that's probably a very good example of just how quickly technology can be adopted. This was out of necessity, for sure. But when I think about the farm industry and producers, they're all the time, as we talked about earlier, they're out in the middle of what would feel like nowhere.
Exactly.
Sometimes no internet connection.
Right. A lot of times in rural anywhere.
Often.
No internet connection.
Exactly. Which has all sorts of interesting opportunities.
Yes, it's a
for
plus
those of
from
us
time
trying.
to time, not if the equipment is broken down.
Yeah, for sure. So,
or if you have a flat tire. So it's that balancing, because we also don't want to remove people from the process at all. There's already a level of ignorance. We're going to ignore that phone. A level of ignorance about where the food supply in this country, but also everywhere, actually comes from. And we can't really lose that connection, or I don't think we should. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just old-fashioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think that that's what makes the agriculture industry unique, is that we grow food, and we eat all of the food that we produce. And so when it comes to things like the use of glyphosate, I'm very comfortable with that chemical. And so, that human connection with how food is grown and, slaughterhouses and whatnot. I mean, I think as a producer, you're always wanting to ensure that you can still grow food tomorrow. And so, of course a farmer is going to look after his or her land, because if they don't, and they don't have clean air or clean soil or clean water, I mean, the repercussions are very negative.
That's the odd thing about this conversation about the environment and business or success or progress and technology, which is we need these things to run parallel. When you talk about Native communities and how they want to preserve the land, they also want jobs, right?
Yep.
I've heard a farmer just the other day saying, I'm not going to use poisonous chemicals. I've got kids. They live on the farm. Like, do you think I'm stupid? Kind of like everybody has to play these dual roles.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, so I went to university in Montreal at Concordia during the early 90s, and something that sticks out to me is I was studying political science, and I sat at the back of the university room, and it was a classroom of probably about 150 people, and the professor at the front, we were talking about gun control. So the professor at the front, of course, I'm a kid from a farm,
exactly.
right? And so the professor asks the question, do you believe people should carry guns? And this is the young me, immediately my hand goes up. And again, thank goodness I always sat at the back of the room. My hand went up, but of course he saw my hand before I could pull it down. And so everybody else was like, I was the only person that had put my hand up. And so then he says, so why do you believe that? And I sort of looked around and said, well, I come from a small community. I come from a farm where, we can't call the RCMP if there was an intruder. But more times than not, we're not worried about intruders. We're worried about animals, coyotes and wolves, a fox, the skunks, and so what we would do is we would, shoot and try and scare whatever is coming at the livestock. And then, after that, you do have to protect yourself. It was probably one of the most horrific things that I ever discovered in university.
All the city kids looked at you.
Oh, they really did. And they're like, and so, but once I explained it, and I said very clearly, I come from a farm where our nearest neighbor is, probably 5 miles down the road. They understood, like, it's not handguns that we're dealing with. And again, I don't want to get into the gun control.
No, but it's really true because it is one of the great divides in the country. If you're living in Toronto or Montreal or even Ottawa, you have a completely different idea of what a gun is than if you grow up on a farm, because it's just a tool. It's another piece of equipment. You have a screwdriver, you have a hammer, you have a combine, you have a gun. Right? It's just... Well,
and you have livestock. Like, you will butcher your...
Yes. Yes, there's a different relationship to the word kill, which, everybody else is so queasy about. But again, it's that connection. You don't have your steak dinner unless the animal's been killed, right? And we don't like to say that stuff out loud, but I think people have to keep that in their mind, right? This is the process. It's nature.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think that's again where producers are doing it with humane processes and trying to ensure that, we do have a very safe and secure food supply chain. And, we're very fortunate in Canada. We have never had a food shortage. Right. The closest we've come is probably COVID-19, where, there was hoarding that was occurring, and for good reason. You know, people were worried.
But honestly, there wasn't a shortage of toilet paper, but everybody thought there would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you think about the next, I know people walk in your door and they bring you ideas, but do you think about this in terms of trends or phases? So yes, you have individuals or companies coming in and saying, here's a fix, here's a new idea, this would change it. But what's the next big picture thing? Mm-hmm. Are we there with, as you say, in the next couple of years, autonomous farming to some degree? Is that the phase we're now going into?
I believe it is. There's, I guess with PAMI, we have to be careful not to be too far ahead of industry or our clients. So on my end, with my recent experience with autonomous equipment and sort of being on advisory boards of some tech companies that, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying and they're doing what they can to enable autonomous equipment. And so there's no doubt on my end that there will be mistakes made, but those mistakes lead to bigger aha moments down the road. So when I think about where, the transportation industry is, mining and agriculture equipment, again, it's not a matter of if autonomous equipment is coming, it's a matter of when and how. So our goal is to, work with our clients and ensure that we have the proper skills to help our clients get their products developed quicker than they would otherwise, and also, make their mistakes cheaper and faster if we can.
And without and finding some way for them to continue to connect. It's not like they're going to sit in the house.
Yeah.
They're still going to have a relationship, whether they're sitting on a computer or, guiding this to some extent. How many people work here?
We currently have approximately 50 people.
That's a good size.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have a lot of people that are very passionate about, the work that they do. When I came on board in April as the new CEO, my vision was for a new strategic plan. I had been on PAMI and PAMI. I'm president and I'm CEO of PAMI, but I'm also president and CEO of West Test, which is a sister organization of PAMI. And so when I came on board, I'd already been on the West Test board as a director and an acting chair. So I was familiar with the people, was familiar with the types of work that PAMI and West Test do, and really excited because of the legacy that PAMI has, enabling greatness in agriculture specifically. So when I came on board, it was with the intent of, developing a strategic plan, and the board is very good. They approved a strategic plan very early on in my tenure. And so that strategic plan has us doing 5 things, and 5 things really well. One is to be operationally excellent. The second one is that we will grow our agriculture revenues, so be a contributor there. Mm-hmm. The third is to be recognized as a leading voice in agriculture equipment. And the fourth one is to ensure that we understand what our customers are doing and to listen to that voice of the customer. And then the fifth is to diversify our skills and our revenues. So that's where the transportation and mining comes in. So that's kind of what I thought was going to be, my biggest challenges and opportunities. And then with COVID-19 hitting, it exacerbated things on our end. So we service clients, and as a result of sort of the contracting economy, we saw our revenues go down. Right. And so we temporarily laid off 9 people in early June. And, in Humboldt, the size that it is, and in Portage, where our other facility is, it's a hit. Yeah. Yeah. And so, what we're doing is trying to ensure that as the economy strengthens, that we are positioned well to take on that work and hopefully welcome the temporarily laid off people back into the office, because we want to give meaningful work to people.
So what's the craziest invention somebody's ever presented you with? Is there something off the wall that turned out being into something that really makes sense? Like your dad with the hitch? I mean, that's
with the
pretty
drop
straight.
Pin. Yeah, well, and there
Maybe
was...
you can't say this because you don't want to offend anyone.
Well, you know what? I can't tell you who the client is.
Yeah.
However, we are working with a client who... recently, one of the engineers had said to me, I don't know if this is going to work. And I said, but you're in the business of resolving problems and making things better. So if you switch your mindset a bit, because he said, I don't think this is going to work. And I said, just put on a yellow hat or whatever hat it is, right? Like, don't wear the black hat, which is you say no to everything. Yeah. And so I said, why don't you try that? At any rate, I think he kind of thought I was crazy, or he perhaps still does. But they had an aha moment, our team did. And it was great to see, because they initially, like, engineers are trained to tear things apart and to, put them together in a very systemic, perfect way. And so when something's not perfect, I think it irritates them. And you know, that's great because our team is then driven to greatness. And so when they did some testing and it turned out and it worked really well. And so we had a bit of a celebration that week because, you know, again, in light of sort of the economy contracting and sort of negative job losses. You needed good news. And we needed some good news. And the team really was great that way.
Over the years, I've always tried to, it's one of the hardest things to capture. Like you talk about the aha moment, and I know that, I mean, because it happens to us in different ways, not just in invention, but to talk to people who are, it doesn't matter whether they're scientists or whether they're authors who are looking for that final chapter or what is the denouement, or, you know, they find that moment, that it's hard, it's really hard to describe or capture creativity, but it's at the core of this.
Yeah.
Your brain has to work a certain way.
It absolutely does. And, you know, I'd say I'm really fortunate. I've worked with some really good entrepreneurs, and I'm MBA trained. So
you've had to overcome it.
Like, yeah. And, you know, I mean, my dad, I would say, I give him a lot of credit here. He's like, just because you have an education doesn't mean you're smart.
Yeah,
so don't forget that, Leah. But on the same time, I mean, it does give me a systemic approach to certain business challenges. And so, you know, my goal is to enable the greatness of others and, you know, to help them with that creativity, because as much as I'm, you know, I will look at something and think, oh, well, it probably can't work because of X, Y, and Z. But, you know, an entrepreneur will look at it and say, well, why can't it work? And, you know, if I make a mistake, I make it at 100% and I'm all right, I'll just move on.
Yeah.
So, you know, I admire and I like working with people like that. I
remember talking to a scientist, and he was trying to deal with this question. He said, the most important part of any painting is its frame. Because without the frame, you don't know what you're looking at, or whether it's upside down, or, and I've always thought of that's how the mind works. Somehow you've got to see that problem in its frame so that you know what you're looking at, and then you can start to resolve this. But I like your notion that the engineers are sometimes resistant to things that don't work. They want perfection.
Yeah, and our team is, you know, our team of engineers, we've got a lot of engineers on staff, and, you know, they are brilliant. And so, you know, we've got a good mix of people that are, you know, consistently, they take it to the next level. And so if a client says, I want, you know, X, our team is so dedicated to excellence that they'll say, well, I'll do X to the power of 2. Yeah. And, you know, that it doesn't matter what your training is, that sort of passion is hard to come across. And
do you feel like, I mean, I've driven past this building probably, I don't know, 3,000 times in my life. If somebody asked me what PAMI was, I wouldn't have known. Are you on the map?
Well, I sure hope so.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, that's a part of my challenge is to raise awareness of the great work that our team does and the types of skills and capital assets we have for testing, because we're very unique in not just the prairies, but in Western Canada. So, you know, definitely the next time you come through, please stop. For any of your listeners,
I'll just point people over there. No, it's really, you don't know that these little hubs of, you know, not only intellectual activity, but very pragmatic activity are just going on. You're just driving past them, and then, you know, you're going to go to the store or the gas station or whatever it is. Like, it's a wonderful story.
Yeah. Well, in we have an Arctic test center where we can get the temperature down to -40, and we can hold it there.
We can do that anywhere.
Yeah. It's not really unique in Canada, I guess, hey? But we can do that in the summer. And,
right.
You know, for certain types of testing, like that's a really unique sort of thing, because if you want to sort of test the limitations of
is it going to work? Is it going to freeze? Is it going to break?
Yeah, like you need to have a controlled environment for those. So I think that's where also our capital assets position us differently relative to, say, you know, a university. We do collaborate with the universities. Right. Our approach on intellectual property is we want to help our clients with better intellectual property, and so we don't have our policy is it's your intellectual property, it's not ours.
Whereas the universities always want to take it.
They do.
Yeah.
And they do licensing and things like that, whereas we don't do that. We haven't. So
that's a really interesting approach. So the person that, I mean, corporately, obviously, if you're dealing with big manufacturers, they're going to insist on that. But if Farmer Joe comes in, who's just invented something, that's a really important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What an amazing story. How's Humboldt to live in?
You know, it's been fabulous. Because of COVID-19, I haven't been able to get to know people, so I've walked the streets quite a bit. And but there is a really great bakery here, the Danish Oven, and you know, it's a great community. I'm a big
We don't
Humboldt
want to
Broncos
tell
fan.
anybody, but there's actually stuff from that bakery kind of sitting in front of us. So don't be jealous. We'll discuss it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you will find that, you know, I mean, you came from a very, very small town, but then you go off and live in cities. I feel the same way. There's nothing like, you know, you feel a community, you sense it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's, you know, my hope is that when things open up, that, you know, I can be a part of the community in a positive way. I've coached a lot of rugby over the years, and
I read that.
My husband and I, we don't have kids, but
and he's a farmer.
He is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a farm manager for a very large operation.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Well, it's a sports town, so here comes rugby.
Yeah, well, I'd love it if I could coach some rugby, because I think it's a great.
That's just wonderful. It's so nice to meet you. Yeah. I have other friends who've said, you've got to meet this woman. She's just so, you know, dynamic. She's just so present, and we need people who are present to rebuild these communities after COVID. Yeah. Thanks so much, Leah.
Well, thank you for coming, and
great.
Please come back again.
We will. So that was Leah Olson, a visionary leader. She is CEO of Prairie Agricultural Machinery Institute, PAMI. It's a place where people come with their ideas and they're made real for them. So thanks for the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Pamela Wallin. We'll see you soon for another edition of No Nonsense.